Hi, I'm Paul Simpson from the football club. Welcome to the Brunton Bugle.
Here we come, blue and white, and we're looking good. You'll be in for a fight, and we fight pretty good. Getting goals is our job, and we get goals good. Looking good, we are Carlisle United.
Hello everyone, you're listening to the Brunton Bugle, the number one place to get your Carlisle fix in the podcast world. I'm Lee Rooney.
I'm Adam Tiffin.
And I'm Mike Booth.
The losing run is finally over as United pick up their first win since New Year's Day and the first clean sheet in 29 games by beating Burton Albion 1-0. We look back on the last two fixtures before looking ahead to this weekend's clash with Reading at Brunton Park.
With a pass so true to Balder Stone and Clark's in view. There's a cross and a run, the old 1-2.
We've nearly done it, guys. We've nearly managed to make it as not the worst ever team at League One level. I think it's one more win we need, is it, I think? To take us to 26 points.
Oh, what a relief.
It's in our hands.
It's got to be the first target for the rest of the season. It has to be the first target. But what a relief, guys, to finally get that win. And I think we all looked at this fixture and thought it looks a good contender to finally get that monkey off our back, didn't we?
Yeah, and a clean sheet as well. It's worth noting. Yeah. That's another monkey off our back. Hopefully we can look ahead now. Some hopefully winnable games, and we can go on a bit of a run.
Mm-hmm. Would you agree on that, Adam? Sorry, I should let you come in.
No, that's all right. I was waiting for you to maybe come in with another question. It's just, like you say, it's not even... At this point, it wasn't even about the manner of the victory. It was just about a victory or about a clean sheet. It wasn't really too important how it came about. But now that we have done it, it should provide a bit more confidence, not only just in the fan base, but in the team too.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, we've got plenty to fit in today. We've got two games to talk about. We're not going to talk too much in depth about the Bristol Rovers game because I don't think any of us went to it, so we've had to sort of re-watch it back and watch highlights and stuff like that. And we obviously were able to watch the iFollow game on Tuesday night against Burton. So before we get going, just a reminder, as usual, the sponsor for the podcast this season is the Carlisle United Supporters Club London branch. They do lots of fantastic stuff for the club in terms of fundraising, also do stuff for exiles in terms of arranging away travel and tickets for some of the big games especially. You don't have to live in the South East or London to join them. You can live wherever in the world and join them. So if you want to find out more about them, go to their website, carlisle.londonbranch.org, or just grab one of the guys at one of the upcoming away games. Charlton's probably a good one, actually. We'll tell you what pub it is for pre-Charlton. I keep forgetting to tell you the pre-match pubs this season, but we'll try and remind you for the Charlton games. If you want to grab one of the guys there, you're certainly welcome to. Right, let's get into news. Obviously, before we're going to be following up with reviews of the Bristol Rovers game and the Burton Albion game. A look ahead to the Reading game, including a chat with Alex from the Elm Park Royals podcast. And then, we're also going to look ahead to the Reading game ourselves and do some predictions and that kind of thing. Let's start with news. Starting off with a little bit of sad news that broke earlier this week, unfortunately. A legend of football and someone who, despite only being here for a season, certainly made a mark at Brunton Park. Stan Bowles sadly passed away after his long battle with dementia, I think it was, wasn't it? Sadly, really, really sad that news this, because obviously none of us got to see him play. We're all far too, sorry, Alzheimer's, sorry, I should say. Yeah, I'd correct myself there. I knew it was one of the two. None of us got to see him play. We're far too young. But we've all heard the stories, haven't we, Adam? He's one of those. He's a maverick, isn't he? One of those players that you just don't hear of anymore, really. Someone who had all that ability in the world, but I don't want to say he was lazy or anything, if you know what I mean. But he just a natural ability, wasn't it, that he had?
Yeah, there's not many of them left in today's football, whether that's for better or for worse. But like you said, it's a player that I'm sure people of generations past would speak fondly of. And you'd look at his footballing resume in terms of the teams he played for. You only need to look at that. You wouldn't even really need to look at his actual performances to tell he was a good player. So yeah, like you said, a very, very sad loss and to a very sad way of going too.
Yeah, and then I mean, you look at it. Like, for us, 33 games, 12 goals doesn't really tell the full story, does it? Because he was part of that team that played against AS Roma in the Anglo-Italian Cup, and allegedly he infuriated the Italians in the Stadio Olimpico by doing kippy-uppies on the halfway line at one point during the game. So, just shows you what kind of person he was. And he left us to go to Queen Park Rangers, where he really is a legend, 255 games, 70 goals, and I think the only shock really is he only got 5 caps for England and 1 goal, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you said yourself, like, we didn't see him play, but the stories of him in that Roma game, like, passed down from Carlisle fan to Carlisle fan and Faultlaw, and I guess they always will, and it'll always be remembered for that. I think my mum saw him play because she went to a few games in the 70s. But yeah, just football, like Adam said, is running out of sort of characters like that. And yeah, he did play for England, and I suppose, to be fair, at that time playing for England, there was a lot of competition up front as well. So he sort of did it all in the game, really.
Yeah, obviously the legendary quote about him, isn't there? That he, if he could pass a bookies as well as he could pass a football, he'd be a very rich man, wouldn't he? So there you go. Right, let's get on to more present stuff. Start off with a little bit of good news. The Floodlit Cup. We mentioned this last week. The under-15 side, we thought they were going to have a really tough game against Crewe Alexandra. Well, guess what? They turned out 3-1 winners against the Railway Men to take themselves into the next round. So brilliant stuff from the young lads there. Goals from Amaru Smith, Caleb Comp and William Rafferty. Put United into the next round. I wonder if William Rafferty's actually related to Billy Rafferty, the former United player. I wonder if he's maybe a grandson or something like that. It's a very interesting one. So well done to the young lads. Once we have details on when the next round game is, we'll tell you about them as well, so you can hopefully get down to support them if it's a home game, of course. If it's an away game, I suppose you could go as well. And a little bit of news that broke today. This is one that's been bubbling under for a little while, hasn't it, Adam? But finally, Gabe Breeze has signed his new deal, and it's a 3-year deal as well, which shows the faith that Paul Simpson and the club have in him, doesn't it? Tying him down till the summer of 2027.
Well, I guess it's in keeping with the theme of the January signings, or the permanent ones at least, which were lengthy contracts, which is something that has only really been present at this club. I mean, it sort of started in the summer with a couple of 2-year deals, but it's really ramped up now. And it does show the faith that they've got in him, but also maybe the acceptance that maybe he's not quite immediately ready, that he will still need some time to improve, because if they felt that was the case, then maybe it would have been a shorter deal rather than offering something much more long-term. But it's great for him, it's great for the club. Obviously, it's a pain that they wish they probably wouldn't have had, but that's the way it's turned out. But they've got it over the line.
I suppose as well, Mike, the way you look at it is that that's one job done for the summer almost, isn't it, really? Unless they're looking to loan him out, which I don't imagine they would straight away. You've got your two first-choice keepers sorted for next season. Well, 2 keepers competing for the first-choice role for next season.
Yeah, I think what I understand from reading between the lines is that the reason this took so long, it wasn't really a money issue. He kind of wanted to know what his role would be. Yeah. And Simo has basically said, look, your second choice. And I think next season, you've got your 3 trophy games in the group stage. You'll have a Carabao Cup game early on, FA Cup. If he gets a run in all them while Lewis is rested, that's really good experience for him. And hopefully, and Lewis may get a little niggle here and there throughout the season. So, I think that'll serve his development fine without him needing to go out on loan.
Yeah, and it may well be second half of the season. Think, let's send him out on loan, get him some game time, and you can get someone on loan in January to cover his place, can't you? So that's good stuff. But yeah, good to have him tied down for next season. One little bit of news to finish off with. A ticket offer announced by the club for the Stevenage game. £10 for adults and £5 for concessions. I think it's a one club, one community thing. I think it's linked to some sort of EFL initiative, isn't it? But yeah, nice ticket offer there. Hopefully to get a few fans down for that match. Because I imagine that it's one of the games that's probably not going to have a big away following, is it? I think it's fair to say, even though Stevenage are up near the top.
Definitely not.
They don't really travel in huge numbers. So
they don't have their own ground, let alone up to us.
Certainly true. No, we don't want to start wars with Stevenage again. We had them last season, but no. Good stuff to see that offer in there. And let's move on to the match review section. So starting off, Bristol Rovers 2, Carlisle United 1. Adam, this is a kind of a weird one, because like following on from the Cambridge game, you'd think, that's 8 defeats in a row now, things are getting worse, blah blah blah. But it was. You can't hide from the fact it was an improved performance compared against the Cambridge game. I know it's a very low bar to move up from, but there was just those slight signs in this game. Okay, maybe things are picking up just slightly. You could see a slight forward trajectory, couldn't you?
Yeah, definitely. I do think there's an element of, positively just because really how much worse could it have got. And the fact that, obviously a lot of people weren't there to necessarily see it, maybe soften the blow of the loss a bit. And I think people sort of become numb to the defeats at that point. But it was pretty clear to me, at least from the commentary, that things were at least better and that we were maybe just outclassed by a team that had superior talent.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the main thing. A couple of real quality players, or 3 real quality players in attack, I think, in Sinclair, Martin and Brown, probably made the big difference in this one. In terms of when the team was announced, Mike, I think the only change was Barkley coming out for charters, maybe, I think, if I remember rightly. So obviously Mellish dropped back into defence as a result. Was that what you expected for this one?
Yeah, I wouldn't say. Yeah, I didn't disagree with the team. I mean, you and me had both been calling for charters to come back in for a little while. Yeah, it's one of them. It's so hard at the minute to really call the team. I mean, we'll touch on it later. I think a few of us wanted Huntington back in, but you wouldn't have expected it necessarily. But yeah, it was, I think, as good a team as we could realistically pick.
Yeah, I think in the circumstances, I think it's probably the team most of us expected, wasn't it? Started the game quite positively though. Had a few early chances. I think Armstrong had one in particular where it was a good bit of play down there. Charters had a really good one where he hit the post quite early on, but then Josh Vella, I didn't expect him to be a goal machine. Did you, Adam, when we signed his record?
No.
There's 6 goals, I think, in his whole career, and he scored 2 already for us, something like that.
I know.
It's ridiculous.
Well, I think also, I don't think anybody was expecting him to be the one that's been pushed higher up the pitch, but that seems to be the dynamic that's been working, with Neil being the one who's sitting deeper, and then he's the one who's trying to join the press and be that more advanced central midfielder. So, I mean, I can't remember of his times playing for Fleetwood and Bolton, I don't think he played as that sort of role, but he's clearly adapted to it well, and it'll be very helpful considering the lack of production we've had from our attack to have some reinforcements in terms of goal scoring ability in behind them.
Yeah, I mean, his yellow card record suggests otherwise, doesn't it? I think it's fair to say that he's not a particularly attacking player.
Dangerously close to. Is it? I think he needs to survive the next 3 games or something like that.
I think he has to survive till the end of the season. We'll have another booking, or he gets a 3-game ban.
That's what I thought it was, but I saw somebody said it was the 37-game mark.
No, I think that's for 10 bookings, I think, which John Mellish has to survive for the next 3 games.
Okay.
So there you go. So yeah, it was a decent move, I thought. Actually, this the corner from the left from Vella was a little bit overhit, but United recycled the ball really well. Comes to Armour, sends a really deep loop high cross to the far post, which is flicked on by a defender. And it's a lovely cushion finish, isn't it, Mike, from Vella to put it in the back of the net?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't realise he sort of had that in his locker. But I was thinking more on Vella on the whole, is that when we signed him, I have to say I was a little bit disappointed. But thinking about it now, and when we were crap last time Simo was here, he's that sort of player that Simo signed last time. I feel like players like your sort of Kevin Henderson's, Kev Gray's, they don't really exist anymore, but I feel Vella is as close as you can get to them sort of pros, and I think he brings good experience to the team, and he's certainly a hard-working player, and I think that's what we need to get us out of what we're in. Yeah,
he's very industrious, and he doesn't shy from getting involved, does he? So one thing, he'll quite happily demand the ball, he'll quite happly go for his tackles, he'll put himself about, which slightly to his detriment with the number of yellow cards he gets. I get that, but generally, I agree with you. I think he's going to be, look, we're probably going to be in League 2 next season. I think he'll be a very good player for us in League 2.
Yeah,
one of those
definitely.
sort of players we're going to need a little bit of experience at that level. So I think he'll definitely make a difference there. So yeah, really good stuff. This we could have gone 2-0 up. Armstrong had a chance from a cutback from back that just went wide of the post, and then unfortunately. This one, Adam, I look back at this and there was a bit of a debate on Radio Cymru in the commentary about this, wasn't there? Is it a bit of naivety from Lavelle to come a bit too tight to Brown? I think I tend to agree with, I think Lummy was the one who said, wasn't it? I think James thought it was just a really good flick. It is a good flick from Brown, but for me, Lavelle has been a bit naive and going in far too quickly to try and make the tackle, which allows Brown to get away on the left.
I wouldn't necessarily lean towards that. I think it's pure quality, and just because of Lavelle's mobility, I don't think he can really. Well, there's two ways of looking at it. You can think, because of his mobility, he has to get tight to him, because otherwise, if he allows him to turn on the ball, then he's done for. Or you can look at it as he's pressed too high, like you said, and been done on the turn. But to produce that as a defender, you can't expect somebody to pull that out of the locker. You can't anticipate that. They've obviously been told to get up close to them on the touch, and I think he's just been done by some very good skill.
Yeah, I mean, the only question I would have on it is, does he need to come that far out to do it? Because it was almost on the halfway line. I wonder if it's a little bit closer to goal, I'd maybe understand it. But for me, it left a big space in behind for him to run in. So it's a good run.
That's literally exactly what I was going to say. I think regardless of how tight he was, like Lavelle coming that deep with, like, if you're marking a striker and he goes that deep, let him. Because if you go with him, you're leaving a massive gap at the back for another player to run into. And when he did that little flick, it had me thinking, we don't have a single player with that in their locker. And well, in the
Diamond, maybe,
in the locker or not. But I think the issue with us this season is, I still to this day, I don't think that we're the worst team in this league, but we are certainly the team that lacks confidence the most. And I don't think that we have a single player with the confidence to pull that off. I think
Gibson would try
if that was. Well, I think if that was one of our players, the way that they've been recently, they'd just sort of lay the ball back for a simple 5-yard pass.
Right.
When they hear the centre-back closing them down that quickly, they'd just do something simple like that. They wouldn't go for the spectacular like Brown did.
It's a good little flick. He's away down the left and puts in a good ball. I would say, I think it's Mellish is the defender. I think he maybe could have intercepted it. It might just be coming across him in a bit of an awkward angle, make it difficult, and he doesn't want to put it in the back of his own net. But as it is, the ball comes to Chris Martin, and he's not going to miss a chance from that far out, to be fair. Decent finish. It's 1-1 into the second half, and United could have gone back in the lead with a really good chance from a corner from the right. Charter sends it in. Armstrong's initial header is blocked just in front of the line, and then Mellish has two really good chances that, in fairness, he just has to try and poke it, and the defender gets in the way both times. And unfortunately, then Rovers go up the other end and take the lead, don't they? And this one, Adam, there's been a bit of debate again about this one. Should Harry Lewis do a bit better? I think, having seen it again now, maybe he could. He might be a little bit unsighted, but the ball, I wouldn't say it goes through his hands, but it's a bit past him before he dived, isn't it?
The replay really doesn't help him. Because it does look like it's not been hit with much venom. It's not on the radio. It seemed like it's right in the top corner, and you hear it and you go, right, well, there's nothing we could do about it. It's just another moment of quality. But you realise when you see the other angle of it that it was fairly central. And I do think he has to do better. But I think earlier in the build up to it, Harrison Neal, he's a very marauding player. He charges out. He's a bit like John Mellish, but with a bit of technique. Is Harrison Neal at times. And he charged out to try and intercept or tackle one of the midfielders who then played it forward to Sinclair, and he just left a massive gap between himself and the defence, which allowed them to break. Obviously, if Lewis makes a save, that's no problem. But I think that's maybe also a bit of naivety on Neil's part, just because of his age and things like that, not having the awareness of the game state to sort of hold his position and just try and stifle them until you can get some players back to help.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. That's the first thing I spotted when I watched the highlights back. I was like, Neil sold himself a little bit short there. He didn't really need to fly into it, really. He could have just, like I said, took a step back and just let the play continue. So, bit of a frustrating one, that one. And from that point onwards, we didn't really create as much, I don't think. And Rovers nearly had a third on the break, but actually, to be fair, Lewis did brilliantly to tip the ball onto the post with it from a short, close range chance. And that was it. Yeah, in terms of talking points here, Mike, we won't go into too much detail because we've got the Burton game to cover. I think we could enjoy talking about that one a little bit more than this one. What I would say is, Mike, we created some decent chances in this match. And the stats-wise, we fairly matched Bristol Rovers, didn't we? In pretty much all departments, including pass success. 74% they had. We had 72. Shots on shots, including shots on target, 14 and 3, and they had 11 and 4. So possession pretty much equal. It was a fairly tight game, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think, that pass success rate 72. Earlier in the season, we were getting like 30s, 40s, weren't we? So I think it's definitely indicative that we're trying to play a little bit more football and not just lump it long so much. And obviously, the green shoots, shall we say, from that game came to fruition on Tuesday.
Yeah, absolutely. Lovely Stephen Presley phrase for us there, Mike. Thank you very much for that.
The one thing I noticed it was especially in the Cambridge game. Obviously, I didn't get to watch the full game for this, but obviously I wasn't on for the reaction to the Cambridge game. But it was really annoying me the fact that the two centre midfielders, so it would have been Neil and Vela and whoever was in central midfield with him, were basically being told to stand next to Armstrong. So there's no one to receive the ball off the back line other than Neil. But I'm happy that's been eradicated from the system, because it was driving me insane in that game.
Yeah, no, you're right on that one. I don't really got a huge amount else to talk about this one. At the end of the day, it was an improved performance, a slight step forward, albeit from a very, very low base, which is why it was important that come Tuesday night we got a good result, and we did. Burton Albion 0, Carl United 1. Yeah, I mean, the change to the team for this one, Mike, Paul Huntington coming in, something we all cried out for, and it made a big difference, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely. We've kept 2 clean sheets this season, and they've both been with a back three of Lavelle, Huntington, and Mellish. So
pretty telling, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think at the start of the season, it didn't look perfect, and I think obviously Huntington got injured, didn't he? But I think Simo was tinkering and changing, maybe trying to get something more perfect. But I remember last season when Feeney was out injured at the start, and we were saying, "Oh, imagine Feeney, Huntington, Mellish, what a good back three that'd be." But that took a few games for it to actually, gel. But yeah, I think that's definitely the way forward now. And Armour at left back as well. Armour was left wing back for both of them clean sheets as well. So I think that's the way to go forwards.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to see Jack sort of getting a little bit back to his best as well, because he's had a topsy-turvy season, hasn't he? But he's looked a little bit more solid playing in there. Jack Ellis also came for this one. Finback dropped out the squad altogether, and Simo's basically said he's protecting him. And I think they're working very cautiously. I kind of feel like we're managing Finback to the end of the season, aren't we, Adam? Just to almost make sure he doesn't do anything bad again. And he's out of contract and Finback, isn't he, at Forest? And I do wonder if he's one we might even target potentially as a permanent one. And if we can look after him and make sure he doesn't do anything stupid with that hamstring, could be.
Yeah, maybe. I don't. This season's not been as encouraging, but obviously his last season in League Two was very encouraging. The massive caveat with though is the injuries, and like you say, we're having to nurse him till the end of the season, really, and that's probably under the advice of Forest too. I mean, obviously, even though he's out of contract, they'll be saying to us, don't you be running our young player into the ground, otherwise you won't be getting any of our good young players in the future. Yeah. But we are lucky that that's one of the areas that we actually have a bit of depth in, even though Emmanuel's obviously not back yet, but he's coming back soon, and Ellis has been playing recently, so we have some cover there, so it's not as big of a hit as it might have been.
Yeah, interestingly as well, there was a change in the formation here, obviously going, as you mentioned, to back three, but also, Mike, that meant Jack Diamond was pushed up front alongside Luke Armstrong, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but that seemed to make a bit of a difference as well. That gave us a little bit of extra quality in that attack, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely. For what we've seen of Armstrong so far, I prefer him in a front two. I think he works better having someone making runs sort of in behind, so he can drop a bit deep. I think it works much better, and by all accounts we saw the best of Diamond from that as well. Yeah,
we did. I do wonder if, it's frustrating to say this, but if we're playing a front three, I think you need someone like a Coyote playing on the left off him, someone who's going to come inside and support him a bit more often. So there you go. Let's talk about the goal then. I mean, I just realised I haven't actually updated the text here on the thing, so it says someone else has scored the goal, but bit of confusion about who scored the goal, which is apparently being cleared up by the dubious goals panel. But frankly, who gives the toss who scored the goal? It's a goal, and it's a winning goal as well. brilliant ball into the middle, wasn't it, Adam, from Charters, I have to say, from the set piece. It was perfect because sometimes they are whipped with a bit too much height, sometimes they're too low and catch out the man. This was almost a perfect height, whipped with pace, and all it needed was someone to glance it in, and that's what we got from Lavelle/Huntington.
If you're one of those players that's in the box, that's the exact delivery you want. You don't want to have to generate all the power. You just want to have to get a touch on it that will guide it in, and that's exactly what it was. And I tend to prefer those types of free kicks where it's being swung from that position specifically, where it's been swung out away from the keeper, because you can afford to put it deep without risking, because the keeper, unless he's very confident, won't come for them unless it's right on his head. Yeah. So I prefer that tactic of having the left footer taking those sorts of free kicks. But as you say, it was a brilliant delivery, and it's something we've really missed this season, is that consistency from set pieces. Yeah.
Mike, whose goal is it then? Lavelle or Huntington?
It's Lavelle's, isn't it? Don't tell me you're going to say Huntington.
I genuinely, I've watched the footage so many times, and because the camera angle's so low and so rubbish, it's really, really hard to tell. I think Lavelle gets the first touch, but I do wonder if he's just flicked it onto Huntington and it's got in off him, and actually that's what's directed it into the net. It's so hard to tell.
You do realise the club put a tweet up saying we spoke to the lads and they've decided it's Lavelle's goal. They both agreed it. So why are you arguing with Huntington?
I'm arguing with Huntington because you may have missed this, but the dubious goals panel have looked at it. Simo's confirmed today that the dubious goals panel have confirmed that it's Paul Huntington's goal.
No,
so that's his first goal of the season.
What do they know?
No, I think your official assist stats are going to have to put Sam Lavelle with a very, very close range assist. So there you go. So Paul Huntington gets his first goal since Boxing Day last year. Not last year, sorry, Boxing Day 2022 it will be, wouldn't it? God, it's been a while. So first goal of the season. And from that point, it was a case of, right, we're not going to concede anything silly here. And I've got to say, Adam defended really well on an absolute pudding of a pitch.
It's a horrible pitch, but I wouldn't stretch as far as say we defended very well. There was a lot of chances that had there been maybe a better team playing against us that we would have struggled. Obviously, Lewis made a good save before we scored from a header from Brayford, and there was a few times actually relating to Lewis where sometimes the ball was crossed in quite close to him, and he said that he's not the type of keeper to come out and claim and dominate a box and things like that. But it's our defence hasn't proved to be great at defending crosses into the box, and when those go in and they're a couple of yards away from him, he's stood on his line. It just makes me feel very, very anxious. So maybe I'm just only remembering the nervous parts, but I don't think we defended brilliantly. But I think we did well enough and deserved to win the game.
Yeah, I think that they had plenty of chances. From my memory, there was a lot of long-range chances that went over the bar. And I say Lewis did make 3 or 4 very good saves. And you mentioned the header from Brayford was a great example of one. There was another one, I think, where he pushed onto the post, didn't he, as well, from a set-piece in the first half, from memory. And trying to think what the other ones were. There was a couple from Camwell in the second half, wasn't there, I think, from... that he saved quite well.
I think there was one from a bit of a scramble in the box in the second half that was sort of fired low at him, which he saved well.
I've got to say as well, brilliant hands to stop Lavelle scoring his third own goal of the season as well. Did
he actually touch it though? I don't know if he actually touched it.
If you watch it back, he gets a slight nick on it, enough to almost take it over Lewis's head. So he did very well, not just to watch it, but also catch it. So,
well, you said brilliant hands, brilliant feet, to be honest, because it'd be very easy for your feet to be like all over the place with that. And the way our season's gone, like 9 times out of 10, that would go in against us this season because we've conceded so many spawny goals like that.
Yeah, we mentioned how good Jack Diamond was, Adam. I mean, nearly scored 2 goals from long range, didn't he? The first one in the first half found a great little bit of space. 25 yards from goal, hit a low shot that the keeper parried and it was then cleared. The one in the second half, that would have been goal of the season, wouldn't it? 25 yards out, flying to the top corner and the keeper palms it over.
Yeah, well, we don't have many to pick from, but it would have been a great strike. And that's the type of quality and almost arrogance that we've been missing in the team. Just to, like, some of the turns he was not only attempting, but pulling off were ridiculous. Half turns, taking it on the half volley, flicking it round defenders like they're not even there. That's the confidence and the raw ability that we just haven't had at all this season. You've had it in flashes maybe from Gibson, but not on a consistent basis, not for a full 90 usually. So that shot that almost found the top corner were it not for Crocombe just symbolises what he is as a player, just someone who's going to take risks and has the quality to pull them off.
What I like as well, that shot that you mentioned in the first half, if you watch it again, it bounces just before the keeper, which I think is the clever thing to do on a pitch like that, because and Armstrong was lurking, wasn't he? And there's an argument that we could and should have had a penalty for that, but having that shot and just making it bounce in front of the keeper, it can go anywhere. And unfortunately, we didn't score off that, but I think it shows a little bit of nous that.
He seems to relish it, doesn't he, Adam? The responsibility, doesn't he? I think that's the first time we saw that. I think putting him in that role where he was going to get a lot more of the ball down the middle, he seemed to really sort of enjoy the fact that I'm going to be getting the ball. I'm the one who's going to try and make things, tick in this match.
And I think the comfortability of having a familiar face alongside him probably helps as well, because obviously his playing days with Armstrong go back to when they were at Harrogate, and they played a lot together and would often link up together. So having that understanding of, when it comes into Armstrong's chest, he knows Diamond's going to be coming round him to pick up the ball immediately, and then he's on his bike. Or when Diamond's on it, he knows what type of runs Armstrong likes to make and things like that. So it's that understanding and cohesiveness that maybe because of the chopping and changing and the inconsistency of the Carlisle front line, we haven't seen much of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Overall, great win. Albeit against, I have to say, a really poor Burton side, Mike. I got to say this, but how on earth are they 15 points better off than us this season? Because for me, clearly they're a side that play the percentages, aren't they? They're a very direct long ball side. They rely heavily on set pieces. A lot of long throws coming to the box. A lot of free kicks and corners. And clearly some sides just don't cope with it. And putting Paul Huntington there seems to be a masterstroke to sort of stop that, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I wasn't there on Tuesday, but I was there for the home game, and I think they're not, from what we've seen, they're not a very good side. I mean, obviously they've pulled off some very good results against better teams than us this season, but I think you're right. I think they like to sort of play the long throws, and they like to, I mean, certainly from the game at Brunton Park, you could tell they wanted to really slow play down and frustrate people, which some teams that'll work against, but I think us, coming from League Two last season, we're kind of used to that a little bit, so it kind of worked in our favour.
Yeah, absolutely. We sort of touched on it briefly there, Adam, but that pitch, it was an absolute disgrace, wasn't it? I mean, it was weird because one flank looked absolutely perfect, but the left flank for us in the first half in front of the dugouts, I mean, poor Jack Diamond was made to look an absolute prat, wasn't he, at one point? He did this brilliant turn to go away down the left, and then he took about 5 steps, and you could just see the earth giving away underneath him, and he just fell on his backside. And I do wonder with some of these things, when a pitch ends up that bad, should the EFL be forcing them to do some sort of returfing or something to make it better? Because it's not conducive to playing any sort of good football, is it?
No, of course not. But how the EFL would mandate, pitch quality would be interesting to see. I think if anything, it played into our favour. If we'd have played against a proper footballing side on Tuesday night, maybe we wouldn't have won. And I think the reintegration of Paul Huntington into the starting 11 was an absolute no-brainer. And they obviously did see from the footage they watched of Burton that they just like to get balls in the box and, those throw-ins. So having someone like Huntington in there was going to be absolutely essential. Well, and thank God he was brought in. But yeah, I think if anything, even though it was horrendous and maybe wasn't conducive to a good game, it probably benefited us.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I mean, the biggest indicator of it, isn't it? If you look at the past success for the game against Bristol Rovers, they had 74, we had 72. The past success for this game, both teams 58. half the passes weren't even accurate, so I think that probably tells you a lot. I mean,
there's 0 point us trying to play football on that pitch.
No, absolutely. What I'd say is, another advantage of having Paul Huntington here, something I sort of noticed watching the game, Mike, is that he's got a real knack, hasn't he? When he picks that ball up in the centre, he can actually ping the ball out to the fullbacks quite well. He's got a decent long range passing him. You maybe don't get that as much with Lavelle, and that's a bonus of having him in that middle centre back rather than Lavelle there.
For Hunt as well, it's his decision making for me. Like, he knows when to do them passes, and he knows when to just hoof it as well, which is critical.
Absolutely, he's clever enough to do that, isn't he? Other talking points from this one, obviously, you mentioned Diamond. I think we're finally getting to see the player that we expected there. For me, when I was looking at it in terms of players that were our top performers in this game, I actually picked out Ellis Mellish. I think that was actually seeing Mellish back at his best in, getting forward and causing problems in attack, and Diamond were the three I picked out. But I haven't put it in the running on it, but I'd give a shout out to Luke Armstrong as well, to be fair, Adam. I thought, not just in terms of attack, you can see the effort he puts in every game. He runs so much, but actually towards the end defensively he was excellent as well. He was coming back, he was winning tackles, he was winning headers, he was clearing the ball. You're really seeing a proper team player there, aren't you?
He doesn't get the recognition for, that type of performance because he hasn't found the back of the net. But, the way that he helped Diamond in the game by, getting him into those high up position by holding up the ball and, like you said, coming back late on to help defend corners, throw-ins, free kicks, whatever it was. It's the type of player that you want in your team no matter what level you're at.
No, absolutely. In terms of the clean sheet, Mike, just good for the whole team, that, isn't it? And it's good for Harry Lewis, though, because he has been under a bit of pressure. And, he did make that mistake in the game against Cambridge. But he was, I think, in terms of the way he distributed all of his feet, we're seeing why Simers wanted to bring him in, aren't we? Yeah,
definitely. And I think a lot of it as well is the understanding between the defence and the goalkeeper is building every game. I think it must be different for them because when Holy was in nets, he'd come out for most corners and crosses and things like that, and Lewis doesn't do that. And I'm not saying that it's a terrible thing he doesn't do that, but if the defence are aware that he's not doing that, and I think the issue early on was they were expecting him to do that and he wasn't doing it. So hopefully now they've got that little bit of an understanding, and going forwards will be a lot better for it.
Yep. Any other talking points from either of you from that game?
I don't think so. I think the general thing was we were the better of the two not great sides. But it's those sort of results that can start a decent run, because it's just getting off the ground in terms of getting those points. It's been so long since we picked up any points, let alone a win. So I couldn't have cared less how we won, even though it was a horrible watch. It's 3 points.
Exactly. Last 10 minutes were not fun to watch, I think it's fair to say. I'll just run through the League One results from the weekend and from the midweek. So at the weekend, Cambridge United lost their local derby against Peterborough United 1-0. Not happy camp there, because obviously Neil Harris has walked out on them to go to Millwall. Neil Harris has now managed in League 2, League 1 and the Championship in the same season.
And he got stacks from the League 2 club first.
Yeah. On an upward trajectory as well, which is insane when you think about it. Barnsley got a big 2-1 win over Derby County. Blackpool, they beat their, their Lancashire rivals. I suppose Bolton were Lancashire once. Bolton 4-1 at home. Obviously, we lost 2-1 at Bristol Rovers. Burton lost their game at Northampton, home against Northampton 2-0. Charlton got a 0-0 draw at home against Portsmouth. Exeter drew 1-1 with Fleetwood. Oxford United suffered a bit of a surprise 2-1 home defeat to Leyton Orient, who were really flying. Port Vale, 5.5-year deal to Darren Moore. I mean, I'm not saying Darren Moore's a bad manager, but it's not looking a great move, that, is it, at the moment? And maybe not a great move for him.
5.5 years at this level is...
There's got to be a clause in there. There's got to be a clause in there that can get out fairly easily. But, I mean, it's not even so much for Port Vale. I'm thinking more for him. He must be thinking, what have I let myself in for here?
I'm not sure there is a clause in there, because I think for him to drop to Port Vale I was quite surprised that they got him, and I think for him to go there's got to be something in it for him.
There'll be some sort of like he gets a big chunk payout or something just to go after however long or something like that. But anyway, Reading, our opponents the weekend, they lost 3-2 at home against Shrewsbury. A bit of surprise on that one. As Stevenage continue to push further playoffs, it's mad. 1-0 win at home against Wickham on the Friday night. Wigan drew 1-1 with Cheltenham Town. Into the midweek fixtures, obviously we won 1-0 at Burton. Derby suffered a second defeat in a row. They're sort of dropping a little bit, but Charlton Athletic, Nathan Jones already had a bit of an impact there, isn't he, Adam? I think it's fair to say 2-1 win.
Well, it's taken them a while. I think the last win before that was the 28th of November, if I remember correctly, which explains their horrid league position, even considering the masses of talent that they've got in that team. But they really shouldn't be in this position. So results like that on paper shouldn't be a shock if you just don't take into account league position. But it's bad for Derby. But Bolton, as I'm sure we'll get onto, they let them off the hook.
They did indeed. Leyton Orient, again, like I said, they're really doing well. 1-0 win at home against Blackpool. Lincoln City, they won 3-0 against Shrewsbury. I think they're fairly safe this season, Lincoln. Shrewsbury, not really out of it yet. Port Vale threw away a 2-0 lead to draw 2-2 with Fleetwood. I think Fleetwood scored it was the 88th and the 93rd minute, something like that, to get the 2-2 draw there. Not a great result for Port Vale. Wickham won 2-0 at home against Cheltenham, whose sort of recent decent forms sort of dropped off a little bit. Stevenage, like I said, once again won 1-0 against Cambridge. Actually, I was going to say, Mike, did you see at the end of this game, Stevenage against Cambridge? Cambridge were going on the counter-attack, and I think like the 89th minute to try and get an equaliser. And one of the Cambridge fans threw a flare onto the pitch, and the game had to be stopped.
Jesus.
Imagine being the idiot who'd done that. Like, you would not be allowed to let it down, would you? For years to come.
Yeah.
Not that they were probably going to score, but, there you go. And, as you hinted there, Adam, Wigan got a 1-0 victory over Bolton in their local derby, and they'll be very pleased with that one, I think it's fair to say. But that's
Did you see the aftermath in this game too?
I saw it was the kick off at the end a little bit. I didn't see anything.
So Marshall Godo was celebrating and went over and celebrated in front of the travelling Bolton fans. So then Bodvarsson came over and to give him a bit of a piece of his mind. And then I think it was the Wigan captain basically stopped him, and they started like having a go at each other. And then I think somebody else started having a go at Godo, and then sort of on the other side of the box, some of the other Wigan and Bolton players got into it, which Ian Evatt then got involved in, and he was getting right in the Wigan players' faces. And it was James McLean put on his Instagram story afterwards, basically like taking the mick out of Ian Evatt for thinking he was going to like scrap the Wigan players. So it wasn't a good look for him.
No, it's a bit of a disappointment on that for Wigan. Bolton. I think they've. If I'm right, that's Wigan done the double over them this season as well. So
maybe. Well, Bolton have lost the last, including the last two as well as Derby. So Portsmouth have been loving this week.
Yeah, I mean they've really been let off the hook because they had that little drop off in form, and now look, actually they haven't lost in the last five, including four wins in that time as well. Derby, it's lucky. I mean, Barnsley have put themselves back in contention to finish actually in the top two. When you look at it, they're on a real one. Oh God, we play them soon, don't we? I completely forgot that. Great, that's something to look forward to. But there you go. That's all the results from the midweek and from the League One. So we're going to take a short break. After the break, I will be back, and I'll be speaking to Alex from the Elm Park Royals podcast. We'll be looking ahead to this weekend's game. A few of the things we talked about, including the ongoing off-field crisis at the club. It just doesn't stop there, sadly, for them. How Ruben Sellers has actually got on despite all those issues, and how much actually they're looking forward to their first trip to Brunton Park since 1982. Been a hell of a long time before even I was born. Anyway, I'll take that short break, and we'll be back with me talking to Alex.
Hi, I'm John Halpin, and you're listening to the Brunton Bugle.
So yes, we're now into part two of this week's Brunton Bugle, and as usual, part two is, of course, Behind Enemy Lines, where we talk to one of the opposition fans from this weekend's game, from an opposition podcast ahead of the match, to basically get their view on their team and what's been going on with them. And it's probably fair to say that the guys we're talking to this week, a lot of stuff's happening with their club of late. Not a lot of it on the pitch, unfortunately. It's mostly off the pitch where the issues have been. We're speaking to Alex from the Elm Park Royals podcast. Alex, how you doing, mate?
I was doing okay earlier in the week, and yeah, we're kind of in the middle of the week now, and Reading have had points deducted, and we're now only 3 points clear of the relegation zone instead of the 5 that we were. So I'm not as good as I was at the start of the week, I'll be honest.
Yeah, it seems like an ongoing thing, doesn't it? This whole points deduction thing for this season. We'll talk about that in a minute. Before we get going, just tell us a little bit first about your podcast and how it came about and how long you've been doing it, that kind of thing.
So the podcast has been going for 7 years, 8 years at this point. I think it started in about 2016, just as we were coming towards the end of the season in the Championship when we finished in the playoffs under Yapstam. We obviously lost in the final that year. Since then, we've been going pretty much every game with some kind of review show. I think we're up to about 500 episodes or something at this point. Wow. It's kind of ridiculous how much time we've sunk into recording over the years. We're become a big part of the kind of the campaign group in terms of the ownership change which we're pushing for. And there's a group of kind of 4 or 5 of us who kind of do the main majority of the shows, and then we've got guests who come in every other couple of shows and things like that. So it's a good release, I will say, given how bad the football has been on the field for the past 5 or 6 years.
Well, on that point, unfortunately, we're going to have to talk about that now. So, I mean, actually, currently, you do find yourselves, out of the relegation zone, thanks to actually what's been quite a decent run of form, especially since the turn of the year. I was looking at this. Only 3 defeats in your last 11 since, I think, New Year's Day or something like that in the league, and quite a few wins thrown in there as well. I know you lost last time out against Shrewsbury, which will be a frustrating result, I guess. That feeling of turmoil around the club just hasn't been able to disappear, has it? You haven't been able to shake it off, and things were a bit funny around about the time we played you. But I can't remember if since then you had the call off against Port Vale. Was that after then? And there's been all kinds of other stuff. I know it's going to be very tough to briefly summarise this, but take as long as you need. Explain what's actually happened in the last few months since we last spoke.
Yeah, so when we last spoke, we were just outside just inside the relegation zone when we last spoke.
Yeah.
And since then, we've actually gone on the field, at least, we've actually gone on a really good run of form. Mm-hmm. It was the game before we played you. It was our first away win for just over a year. We won at Wycombe 2-1. Yeah. Followed it up by beating yourselves a few days after that. And then I think since then, as you say, we've lost 4 games in total since then, 2 at home and 2 away. And we've actually looked quite solid on the field. We've picked up results at we beat Stevenage away, we beat Derby at home. We came back from behind against Peterborough twice. We came from 2-0 down against Cheltenham away from home. We've been picking up points at a decent clip for a few months now. I think someone pointed out a couple of weeks ago that if the season had kind of started back then, just before we played you, we'd be somewhere, I think we'd be about 7th in the table or something, disregarding the points deductions and things like that. So on the field, I'll be honest, the squad are actually doing a ridiculously, good job in the last couple of months, given the situation and the circumstances. The obvious issue is that off the field, we don't really have any control over what's going on. And no one really knows when, if we do pick up a 3-point, seeing a win, no one really knows if it's going to still remain the week after or the month after because of the EFL deciding to take off more points against us. So it's we kind of just have to keep picking up as many points as we can before the end of the season in the hope that we don't lose enough points that we end up in the relegation zone anyway.
It's a mad one, isn't it? Because it's frustrating because the EFL have to have some sort of regulations in place to make sure these things, clubs don't take the mickey with this sort of stuff. But you guys have clearly got an owner who just doesn't care, and he doesn't care about the club, he doesn't care about the fans, and he's the one who's doing it. And they can fine him all they want, but he's not going to pay those fines, is he? And and you look at in terms of the points, he doesn't seem to really be bothered by the fact that you haven't points deducted because he's not paying HMRC and all that kind of thing. So, how frustrating is it that you've got that owner there who's clearly using it as a plaything and doesn't really care, and you can't really have as much of an impact on terms of trying to get rid of him?
Yeah, the trying to get rid of him is a huge ongoing task. It's not something which is particularly easy, and realistically, anything that the fans can and try to do is only going to have limited impact, because ultimately he's the person who can decide when he sells. Like no fan or fan group can force somebody to sell a club, however much you want to. You can try and put pressure on them, which is what we're trying to do. But if he doesn't sell, he doesn't sell. There's nothing you can really do about it ultimately. So it's an extremely frustrating situation for Reading fans, because there's no real control, and there's no real kind of light at the end of the tunnel necessarily, because we don't know who's going to take over the club, if the club's going to get taken over. Realistically, you could ask 100 Reading fans, and I think it would be a very even split as to whether they would think we will be playing football next season or not at the minute, because it's difficult to say that we will be. I think, because without a new ownership, it's tough to see the club being able to sign players in summer, be able to fulfil fixtures next season, etc. And it will be one of those situations, a bit like Bury, where if we don't get taken over, I just don't see there's going to be a way around us doing anything except being expelled from the league. And the EFL are obviously in a position where they have to deal with Reading being in a situation like this, where they have to be seen to be fair to other teams, but at the same time try to help in some way. I'll be honest, again, I don't really think that they're actually helping the situation particularly anymore. People might disagree, but realistically, being fined for not paying tax, which we cannot afford to pay, it isn't a sporting advantage as much as the EFL have discussed the fact that it gives us a potential sporting advantage. Currently, it just doesn't. We've been under an embargo for 5 years. We haven't signed a player. Every player that we have signed has to be signed off by them. There isn't enough money in the club, and the club basically relies on Die Young to fund the kind of the shortfall. And having points deducted ultimately makes the club less attractive to purchase for somebody. And the ultimate goal for the EFL, clearly at this point, they don't want him to be in charge, but the ultimate goal is to remove him from the EFL. They're not really necessarily helping the situation anymore. So the EFL are frustrating in one sense. Dayami is frustrating in another sense. It's just a kind of very helpless situation for Reading fans at this point, I think.
No, absolutely. Let's talk about on the pitch a little bit then. So how happy are you with the job that Ruben Sellers has done in such difficult circumstances? Because, I mean, like you said, you look at your squad, it's quite a young and inexperienced squad in places. And obviously you mentioned the transfer embargoes has been a bit of a nightmare for the last few years for you. But if you were to add those 6 points back on that you've had taken off, you'd be above Wickham into 14th place. It'd be 2 points behind Wigan. And a lot of people, said, such a good team this season have done so well. It kind of goes to show, doesn't it? That it's if those sort of restrictions were in place, you'd actually be in a fairly solid place right now.
Yeah, the first 15 games under Sellers was a struggle, and I think we got to the end of October roughly, and there was definitely a lot of calls to remove Sellers because of the fact that we were throwing away games left, right, and centre. I think we've lost probably 4 or 5 games in the last minute this season. We've given away another probably 4 or 5, wins, which have been converted into draws in the last minute. And a lot of that early season kind of pessimism and despair around Ruben Sellers and his performance, I think, comes from the fact that obviously he had no real pre-season with this squad. So we basically spent the first 2 or 3 months of the season trying to understand what our best system was, what our best 11 was. And we spent the first probably 10 games playing this 4-2-2 formation where we played with 2 kind of pivot midfielders and 2 wingers and then 2 strikers. And we didn't have our best players available at that point. Sam Smith, who signed in summer, was injured up until the end of October. Lewis Wing was injured until mid-October as well. And then we got to November and we changed formation, and we've kind of gone to a 4-1-4-1 or kind of a 4-2-3-1 system, which has made us look much, much more solid, especially at the back. We've improved a lot at the back. So, yeah, I mean, the turnaround has been ridiculously impressive, I'll be honest, given the situation. And I think he's won a lot of Reading fans round. He's not won everyone round. And I think, if it was a normal situation, he probably wouldn't have kept his job. However, we're not in a normal situation ultimately. And I think he's done a pretty good job from my eyes, as you say, with being 14th place, which I think is fine. Most Reading fans would have been very happy with a mid-table finish this season, given, we finished in the bottom 5, I think, in the Championship 5 of the last 7 years or something like that. It was coming that we were going to get relegated, and actually a season of mid-table wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world for the club in it by any means, and I think most fans kind of would have accepted it. So yeah, if without the points deductions, if we'd been in 14th place, I would have been very, not delighted, but like I would have been absolutely fine with it. So I think he's doing a good job, all circumstances considered. And if he keeps us up, I'd be disappointed if he wasn't here next season.
Yeah. January transfer window, a bit of a tough one for you guys because you did lose a few players, didn't you? And you've sort of, I've seen you bring a couple in. Maybe I think one of them was a player come back on loan. Was it he'd sold out? Possibly, I remember rightly.
Yes, we sold players kind of left, right, and centre to be able to fund the club in January. The club had basically said in December they wouldn't do this. They wouldn't sell players to be able to fund the club, and it would be, the squad would be kept together as best it could. But we sold our team captain, not club captain. We sold our team captain, Nelson Abbey, to Olympiacos, which is not, he's going to end up going to Nottingham Forest, presumably in summer. We sold Tom Holmes, and Holmes and Abbey had been our kind of centre-back pairing up until January. We sold both of them in January. Tom Holmes got sold to Luton. He has come back on loan, but he got injured pretty much as soon as he came back on loan, actually. He got injured and he hasn't played since mid-January now. I think he's still out probably for another couple of weeks, so he won't be playing this weekend. We sold a number of kind of younger players as well from the academy, and we sold a couple of kind of bit part players who haven't really played in the squad this season and basically just haven't really made the grade under Ruben Sellers necessarily, despite being around the squad. So we didn't sell a huge number of first team players, although there was a lot of links with teams, but I think it really kind of like put a big strain on the fans, and hence the Port Vale kind of abandonment, because we ended up selling 2 players, and I think we ended up selling Tom McIntyre to Portsmouth for £75,000. Realistically, he is out of contract in summer, and he's probably not worth he's not worth millions or anything, but he's certainly worth more than £75,000 that we sold him for. And it essentially became a bit of a fire sale. We got, obviously, like I said, Tom Holmes back on loan from Luton for the rest of the season. We signed an Arsenal youngster on deadline day from on loan, I think he's only made 1 appearance so far, and we ended up conceding in the last minute when he came on. So that was a bit of a rocky start for him. But yeah, it wasn't a great January transfer window, but it could have been worse, all things considered.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it results-wise, it hasn't really affected you that much, to be fair. So it's not necessarily been a bad thing in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, the strange thing is, of course, is that because we sold our 2 centre-backs who had been playing, we ended up with Tom Holmes and Tyler Bindon, who's been a revelation really at centre-back, to be honest, playing. And then Tom Holmes got injured, and we've resorted to playing in Bengay, who's really never been played at centre-back for Reading before. Typically, he's been kind of a backup winger, a backup right-back for Reading. And he's been thrown in at centre-back. And actually, for the past month or so, we've looked relatively solid in most games with Mbengwe and Bindon at centre-back. And I think they've got a combined age of like 39 or 40 or something. It's incredibly young between them. But we've looked pretty solid with those 2 at the back. And it hasn't hugely affected results, despite the fact we've sold off some of those players.
Well, who are the danger men to watch out for this weekend then?
So going forwards, we do have a lot of kind of firepower. I'll be honest. Any of the front players are going to be a worry, I think, for Carlisle. Harvey Nibbs has had a really good season. He does have games where he's on and off, and if he's having an off game, you just won't notice him. He'll play in the centre behind Sam Smith. Sam Smith's done really well this season for us. He again is similar to Harvey Nibbs in the sense of he will go on and off, and he goes through streaks of goal scoring. I think he's on 7 now for the season. He did score last weekend against Shrewsbury, but that was his first goal since Boxing Day. So it had been a while. Femi Aziz on the right-hand side has been a big improvement this year over what he had been offering previously. He's really kind of stepped up this year. Plymouth were interested in him in January, but he stayed at Reading. He's got a kind of a lethal shot from outside the area at this point. It kind of depends on the day as to how effective that shot is, but he does have if he hits it right, he's got a decent shot on him.
Is he the one who scored from long range against us? I can't remember. Someone scored from long range.
No, I think he scored. He didn't score from long range against you. He scored, I think it was the 5th goal against you. It was Lewis Wing who scored long range against you.
You're right. Yes.
And
right.
Lewis Wing is probably, I haven't, seen every central midfielder in the division, but I think he's probably got to be up there in terms of, attacking. In terms of attacking central midfielders and creative central midfielders, he's got to be up there in the top 3 or 4 in the division. He's, a class above, really. His shooting ability is ridiculously good, and he could pretty much have a goal of the season competition on his own this year. He's scored so many good goals. As you say, the goal against yourselves back in November, he scored one against Fleetwood a couple of weeks ago. His goal against who would it have been? His goal against Port Vale recently was really impressive as well. He's basically just got an incredibly accurate strike from outside the area, and if you give him too much time, he will shoot. And I would say he's probably our most dangerous player, Lewis Wing. If he has a good game, Reading turn up, we will create chances. It's just a matter of whether we give up chances at the back as well, and how well our kind of back line plays.
Yeah. You've been very generous with your time, Alex. Thank you very much. So before you go, though, what's your prediction for this weekend's game?
I have to predict a Reading win. I can't face giving a 650 mile round trip and seeing us lose. So I'm going to say 2-1 to Reading, and just fingers crossed that some of those other teams around us lose this weekend.
Yep. Alex, thanks very much for your time. Before we go, just remind everyone where we can find your pod again.
It's Elm Park Royals. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all the different social medias, etc. And we'll have a review of the game against yourselves after the weekend. Great
stuff. Alex, thanks for your time. All the best for the rest of the season after this weekend, and really hope that all the off-the-pitch stuff gets sorted before the end of the season as well, because the last thing you want is another summer of going through all that and wondering what on earth's going to happen with your football club. It's not a nice place to be. We know that from that about 20 years ago we had that issue as well. So, yeah, we know exactly how that can feel.
Nice one. Cheers, Lee. Thank you very much.
Cheers. No problem at all. We'll be back just after this break, and myself and the rest of the guys will be looking ahead to the game this weekend.
Hi, it's Tom Piatic II, and you're listening to the Brunton Bugle.
And we're back into part 3 of this week's Brunton Bugle. Thanks once again to Alex from the Elm Park Royals for speaking to us ahead of the big game this weekend. Me and Mike are hoping to catch up with him for a pint this week, aren't we? He's an old friend of yours, I seem to remember you saying.
Yeah,
that'll be very good. Right, let's look ahead to this weekend's game then, guys. Reading. I think a weird one, Reading, Adam, aren't they? Because we sort of looked at the start of the season, we were kind of like, there's a bit of ability in that squad, but they're such a mess off the field. Surely they're going to really struggle. But actually, all things considered, they've done fairly well, especially since the turn of the year. Their form's been quite remarkable. Since they beat us, in fact, 5-1. They've only lost like a handful of games, haven't they?
Well, it was a squad that you looked at the start of the season, and just because of the financial problems, it was quite an inexperienced team, and with a manager who hadn't managed at this level before, you weren't really sure what was going to happen, and the points deductions and all the off-field stuff, which is still continuing now. They've done very well, to be fair to them, to keep themselves sort of out of it, but now they've been dragged back into it a little bit by this most recent points deduction.
Yeah, it's kind of... It just feels like every time for them that they Mike, that they're getting away from trouble, one of these points deductions suddenly drops in there and they're like, oh, come on. We look like we're getting ourselves towards safety and now we're back dragged back into it. Because if you gave those 6 points back to them, they'd only be, I think, a couple of points behind Wigan in the table.
It's crazy, isn't it? Them points deductions have really... I think it probably takes its toll on you mentally as well, because it's like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back a lot of the time for them. But yeah, either way, they're right in it with us, and this should be one of the home games that we're looking to win.
Yeah, Adam, when we look at the January transfer window, we talk about how teams are affected by it. Reading were really not able to strengthen and actually considerably weakened in defence. They lost Tom Holmes to Luton Town. They got over £1 million back from him. He's been loaned back, but he's been injured. I think after one game, he got injured again. Tom McIntyre, they had to sell for peanuts for $75,000 to Portsmouth because he was out of contract in the summer. And Nelson Abbey has gone to Olympiacos, albeit we think he's probably going to end up at Nottingham Forest eventually for an undisclosed fee as well. I mean, to lose a big chunk of your defence and then still be performing probably shows what a good job Ruben Sellers has done there.
And he should sort of be expected to be doing a good job because, he was only managing the Premier League last season. It was almost an odd thing to see him dropping right down to the bottom of League One, pretty much, from a Premier League side. But he's a very good coach, and like you said, he's done a very good job with the limited resources that he's been given. I mean, they've just been asset stripped, basically. And, even the working conditions they're having to, play under, they're not allowed to... Well, this might not be the case anymore, but they weren't allowed to stay overnight after games to cut costs. Players are having to eat microwave meals.
They weren't allowed heating on at the training ground, were they, I think?
They weren't allowed heating. So they've done very well considering they've been handed an absolute stinker of a situation to work with.
Yeah. Who are the players that stand out for you in their squad, Mike?
I mean, Sam Smith, obviously. I was disappointed that... Because we were apparently linked with him in the summer. I was disappointed that he didn't wind up here because he scored, 17 goals last season for Cambridge in a struggling team?
Something like that,
yeah. Who else have they got? I mean, I'm not even going to say the name of that one third from bottom for them. You can do that, Lee.
No, you can forget it.
Calvin Ahib Tim Han or something.
We should apologise if any of his family happen to be listening. I just haven't had time to look up how to say it.
Yeah. Harvey Nibbs as well. Decent player. Yeah, they've certainly got a few that can cause us a few problems.
I mean, Lewis Wing has always stood out to me as a good player at this level. Adam, he played for a long time at Wickham, and he's got Charlie Savage in there as well, ex-Man United, obviously son of Robbie. Everyone's a bit surprised they got him in something because he only made his Man United debut towards the end of last season, didn't he? But yeah, there's players in there that can cause us problems, definitely.
Yeah, well, Lewis Wing was one of the names that I was going to mention, and it wasn't too surprising for me, the Savage move, just because he was with Forest Green last season, who obviously were right down the bottom of League One, but he seemed to be a little bit above their level when he was there, so it wasn't too much of a surprise. But the fact that he's there permanently maybe was the unexpected part of the deal. But it's, you look through the squad and there's not a lot of experienced operators at this level. Which, again, is testament to the job that Ruben Sellers has done.
I mean, Harley Dean seems an obvious one. I'm not sure how much he's actually played for them this season, to be fair. I know that there's been a few issues with David Button recently. I think in the game against Shrewsbury, he maybe let a couple in that he probably could have done better with for them. In terms of sort of looking at other things, let's look at some of the sort of stats and that sort of stuff. Head-to-head, it's only the 12th meeting between the two sides. I haven't played them very often. We've won 2, drawn 4, and lost 5. We've only lost 4 of our last fixtures against them. 3 of those fixtures came in the early 1980s, so it's a stretch to use that as a stat, I think it's fair to say. It's not going to stop me. In terms of sort of recent form, like I said, their recent form's pretty good. They're 7th in the last 6 games form table, record of 1-1 drawn, lost 1 lost. We are now sitting in 23rd. We're off the bottom, finally, with a record of loss, 1. There we go. Don't get me no excited, that one. So that's those sort of bits. Referee for this one, Martin Coy from County Durham. It's his 7th season as an EFL referee, taking charge of 18 games so far this season, handing out 82 yellows and 3 red cards. Last season, he handed out 47 yellows and 3 red cards in just 17 games. And the last United game he took charge of was a 2-0 defeat to Derby County earlier this season, where Sam Lavelle was booked for the Blues that day. Right, let's talk about United then. What are we thinking with this one then, Adam? Are you thinking... My thoughts are, I think we need to be sticking with this 5-3-2, 3-5-2, whatever you want to call it, for the rest of the season. Just stick with it. Try and get a bit of confidence and form into the team. Pretty much pick the 11 that played on Tuesday night against Burton for the rest of the season as long as they're fit, and just drop players in and out as players are not quite fit and that kind of thing. That's what I'd be looking to do. Maybe changing the wing backs up a little bit just to keep them fresh.
Yeah, injuries withstanding, I'd probably agree with you, just because it's probably the most rigid formation and setup we've got, but also allow us for a bit of creativity in the forward areas.
Yeah,
I don't think we can get away with playing 2 wingers either side of Armstrong this season. I just don't think our midfield and defence is strong enough to have... Well, Diamond especially isn't a passenger, but Gibson is more so defensively. But I just don't think you can afford to have that many people high up the pitch and risk getting counter-attacked on, especially when we struggle to score goals anyway, and we're a bit leaky. So, yeah, I would agree with you. That formation that we played against Burton, the general lineup is what I would stick with at least for now, but probably till the end of the season.
The only one I'd maybe look at is maybe Finn back in for Jack Ellis, possibly. I'd be harsh on Jack, but I just think Finn's got a little bit more quality going forward. That's the only real difference, I think, in terms of that. Mike, what would you do?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say about Back and Ellis, because we talked about Back being sort of rested and managed on Tuesday night, but I think Ellis needs a bit of management as well because of his injury problems. So I think it would probably work out well for them both if Back was to come in for Ellis. But other than that, I'd probably keep exactly the same team.
Yeah, I think having Charters in there is a big thing as well, as we mentioned in the review section. The fact that his set pieces make a big difference to the team, don't they, in terms of the quality of getting the ball into the box, because that's something we miss. And actually, that's something we miss with having Paul Huntington in the team. Although he's not scored that many goals for us, he does offer a bit of a threat, doesn't he, Adam? In terms of getting on the end of stuff.
He's just a bit of physicality that we don't have when he's not there. Like, I'm pretty sure he's the tallest of our defenders, and even though he's maybe not as physically strong as a Lavelle, he's got the height to be able to get onto things. I think with Charters too, he can be a bit sort of rough around the edges when he's on the ball, but if he's picking out a pass or picking out crosses and corners, that's the quality we don't really have in our midfield at the moment. He's probably the only actual midfielder, who is or has that ability to put in those types of deliveries, because I don't really think Neil or Vella are that type of player.
You pointed by one, the ball's a really good one, and someone made this point to me actually, saying that if you watch back with him, it's amazing how many times his first touch is a bit loose and it gives the opposition a chance to get the ball. It's something he does need to work on a little bit if there's anything in his game that he could do with improving. He can get that first touch better, he could be a real quality player for us, I think.
Didn't that lead to the second Bristol goal, if I remember correctly? I feel like a loose touch gave them possession.
Yeah, I think maybe, possibly, yeah. But it's just something one of my mates noticed, and I watched a little bit of the highlights back. I was like, actually, yeah, it's a fair point. That something you could really do with working with. So we're generally in agreement. Same 11 as long as they're fit, and I think Simo's probably going to... I don't think Simo's going to do anything daft after a win like that. I think he's going to be like, yep, as long as it's worked, it's worked. Let's stick with it. And and in terms of the bench, not a huge amount of change there. You'd maybe bring Emmanuel in, maybe as the full-back option, possibly, unless he obviously is going to bring back in instead. I don't know. It's just the defensive ones that you got to tweak with there, isn't it, really? Because your midfield ones pick themselves. We haven't really got many other options, have we? In terms of that sort of
Do you
stuff.
think... I think Jordan Gibson's not going to get much game time between now and the end of the season. I just don't see it because of Diamond's emerging. I mean, we knew about his quality anyway, but it's come into the fore now, and his partnership with Luke Armstrong and the way that we're probably going to set up. I don't really see a role for him for next season.
I think he could maybe in some games he could come on for Charters and be that sort of third. And especially if we're pushing forward in games, he could be that player who's basically playing as the extra. The midfielder that pushes forward behind the front too. I don't think he's going to start as many now for a bit. I think he might have a little bit of time at 11.
Yeah, that was I don't think he's going to be in the starting lineup much. No. And it also could be a case of Simpson thinking ahead to the summer, thinking, right, who am I going to realistically offer a deal to, and prioritising the players that he expects to be here longer term.
Yeah. I mean, like I said before, I was sort of thinking of the kind of players that Simo signed last time he was here, and I'm a fan of Gibson, but I don't think he's a Simo player, and I think it's probably best for him as well. There'll be a manager out there that can get the best out of Jordan Gibson, but I don't think Simo's it. But I think Simo's the kind of manager that'll get the best out of a Josh Vela, for example. And I think, this is almost, I mean, I hate to get drawn into it, but we're pretty much down, aren't we? But this can be a bit of a pre-season for us.
Well, could they? We threw the question. Obviously they won't. Obviously they won't.
Well, we win these 2 games. We're 7 points adrift with a game in hand. Win that, it's 4 points adrift. Can be done.
Hey, we're going to get accused of being the happy clappers podcast here. Let's be careful.
Realistically, we can't. But
no. But like I say, I think this is an opportunity to sort of build what we want to do next season. Really,
these next 3 games are quite big, aren't they? When you look at it, I mean, Barnsley's going to be a tough one. It's a Tuesday night. Hopefully, they'll bring a decent following. If we can get a good result in the next 2, you'd be hopefully going to a bit of confidence. But obviously, you mentioned like Charlton and Shrewsbury. There too, we're looking at thinking, right, surely maybe we can target a few points out of those, maybe 4 points, possibly get a draw at Charlton and a win at Shrewsbury, maybe, I don't know.
I think just win them all. Simple as.
Well, yeah, if we can, but realistically, better solid performances where we're not getting totally outplayed, where we're looking like a team. That's the key thing for me, because once you get those 3 out of the way, you've got Stevenage, Peterborough and an informed Lincoln side. That's a tough run. It is a really tough run. So, yeah.
I think that Charlton game's maybe a bit more winnable than it maybe seems, just because of the poor form they've had this season. If we can stifle them early and get, because it's a massive a massive ground, the Valley. So if you can sort of get tensions up in there and a bit of unrest in the crowd, that could be a game that we could just nick.
It'll be interesting to see how many we take for this one, because obviously our fans tend to like a good London trip, and the trains at the moment, touch wood, are okay for it. I've seen a few people saying, they're probably not going to do it now because the form's being bad or whatever and stuff like that. But get a win on Saturday, suddenly a few people might like, you know what, I quite fancy doing that trip now, and you never know, a big following, it could really, really be something for that game, couldn't it?
I did see someone after Saturday, I think, selling their train tickets for Charlton on Facebook.
Selling the train tickets.
Yeah.
There you go.
But it's one of them, because of having to buy your train tickets in advance. We all booked our train tickets for it when we thought we were staying up.
Well, I don't think we ever thought we were staying up. I think we just bought them because they were cheap at that point, but there you go. Right, let's see some predictions for this one then, guys. Adam, you can go first.
I feel like this could be a very yo-yo game at times, just because of the type of players they have. I feel like they'll try and go in behind, especially if we try and press them early. I feel like they'll try and go over the top of us. I am going to go with a 2-1 win for Carlisle, with goals from Jack Diamond and Josh Vela.
Okay, Josh Vella's goal-scoring machine still. Mike, what are you going for?
I'm going to go for a 3-2 thriller. with goals from Armstrong, Charters, and Lavelle.
Really annoyed me that because I was going to go for 3-2 as well. You absolute swine. So I'm going to go 3-1. I'm going to have a bit more confidence in defence. 3-1 win. Goals from Armstrong, Diamond, and Big John. Go on, Big John's going to get one. There you go. That's what I'm going to go for. Right, here's Dan's prediction for this game.
Back to winning ways at Burton. Let's follow it up with a comprehensive 3-1 win against Reading and goals from Armstrong, Diamond, and John Mellish.
You've got to be kidding me. He picked exactly the same as me. Absolutely. I genuinely did not listen to his thing for it, but I never do. I was just putting them straight in. That's really annoying because I was
really building the suspense there. There was lengthy gaps between the words. I like it, Dan.
Bit of tension there, bit of tension. Right, let's wrap things up then and do the X-Files. It's not quite as busy as some of the previous weeks, but some interesting bits in there. First, let's start with the goals and sort of other things from last weekend. Only 3 to pick out. Dan did originally put Angelo Balanta in here, but I went and double-checked, and I think his goal was changed to an own goal in the end, so his isn't included in case Dan's listening, like thinking, why did he not put Angelo Balanta in? That's why. Well, let's start at the very top. Big Jared Branthwaite. He scored again for Everton in their 1-1 draw at Brighton. I mean, get him on that plane, Gareth. Go on. Get him on. He's got to be. I mean, surely, Adam, he's going to be playing in these friendlies come next. Well, I say next month. Tomorrow is next month, isn't it? Come March.
I bloody hope so, but also at the same time, my personal pride really hopes it's not, because I used to play against him when I was a kid, and the fact that he might be going on the plane of England is demoralising to say the least.
No, but you could say that playing against you sort of moulded him into the player that he is today. And
Mike still
I appreciate it, Mike.
Mike is still taking credit for Liam McCarran's coaching when he was like, 6 years old or something like that. So,
but McCarran played against Branthwaite and trained every day, and that made Branthwaite the player he is. So indirectly, I made Branthwaite the player he is today.
What a stretch.
Did you? I assume you both saw the goal that Jared scored.
Yeah, it's a good
strike.
We should comment. For a big centre back, great first touch, and then bang, curls it into the top corner. It's brilliant bit of play, and he got a lot of praise on Match of the Day as well. And they keep. I mean, look, he had a little feature on Football Focus, I think, on the Saturday as well. So
we had one on Monday Night Football when they played Palace as well. I mean, anybody who does fancy football, get him in your fantasy team because he's only like 4 million, and he's been absolutely smashing it.
Been in my team all season. So, yeah.
I think I could probably say the same. But going back to your point about should he be going on the plane, I mean, I'm trying to think of other left-footed centre-backs who were...
Just other centre-backs in general, to be honest.
Well, Tyrone Mings is injured. Tyrone Mings is injured, so he's not going to go. Levi Colwell
still take him.
Levi Colwell was probably a contender for it, but he's not. His form's dropped off massively.
I think he'll... Well, to be fair, Southgate is very reluctant to actually pick and consistently pick new players unless he absolutely has to.
But I just feel he's going to look at Branthwaite and think, big, strong lad, can play across the back four, left-footed, centre back,
likes a header,
ball player, likes a header. I just think he's. I just at the moment, I just can't see how he won't get in that squad. I just really, really can't. But there you go.
I just hope there's a clause included in our deal with
Everton. There 100% will be a clause.
I was going to say there should be. If there's not, words will be had.
It'd be lovely to get another wedge of money from them for that. The other 2 goal scorers that weekend, Jordan Cook, a rare goal from the other Cook. He scored for Blythe Spartans in their 2-2 draw with Boston United. And David Simonton continues his fight to be the Northern Premier League, Premier Division top goal scorer this season. He scored again for Workington as they beat Matlock Town 2-1. A little bit more on Workington in just a minute. Into midweek, James Tavernier and Tom Lawrence both scored for Rangers in their 2-1 win at Kilmarnock. And then a couple of braces. Ozzy Zanzala scored twice for Newport as they beat Harrogate 4-1 away from home. I mean, he's not scored too many for them, has he, Zanzala, Mike? He's sort of went there with a big sort of... He just seems to jump club to club and can't find his feet wherever he goes, can he? He's a strange one.
Yeah, he's a bit of an enigma, isn't he?
Yeah. Someone who's not an enigma, someone who's an absolute legend. Joe Garner, he's really settled into life at Oldham Athletic, hasn't he, Adam? Another brace for him, scoring at Oldham's 2-1 win at Eastleigh in midweek. It's just nice to see, isn't it?
Yeah, and he's he's too good of a striker in terms of obviously his physical attributes are diminishing, but in terms of know-how and just the smarts of the game, he's too good for that level, and it really doesn't surprise me that he's started as well as he has.
Yeah. Into the other bits. First, I'm going to do the second one first because it's Danny Devine. But a bit sad news is he broke his leg. I think a clean break on his tibia. I saw something on Twitter from when he's playing the games with Trinity. So, yeah, wish him all the best in his recovery from that because especially as a non-league player, it's not much nice, is it, really, to break your leg like that. But the one big bit of news that broke suddenly the other night, early in the week, Danny Granger has announced that he will be standing down as Workington boss at the end of the current season. Speculation. It's already started, Adam, on this one, hasn't it? As to where he's going next. There's some talk that potentially he could end up at United in some sort of role in the academy, possibly. He has come out and said, hasn't he, that he has nothing lined up. He just thinks it's the best time to get out. But he's the kind of person you'd want involved with the club, isn't he?
Of course, yeah. His association with the club is a key part of that, and would be a key part of it if they do try and bring him in. I can't remember if this was in the exact statement he put out, but I feel like I remember seeing something of him saying that he's looking to like new things to do rather than he feels that he's done what he can with Workington maybe, and that it's time for a bit of a change, which maybe would hint at a bit of a change in roles or levels. Yeah, I'd be amazed if it was just sort of a case of taking time off. It could well be, but I wouldn't be like him. I don't think that's in his character to be like, right in the middle of my sort of early coaching career, I'm just going to take a bit of time off. Yeah, I mean, his working side has a reputation of playing good football as well at that level, don't they, I think? And I just feel, Mike, that, we need to be looking at getting former players integrated into the club. A lot of other clubs are really good at doing that. Crew are quite good at doing that, actually, especially players who don't quite make it. They often get them involved coaching really early on and build them up. I kind of feel like him and get Devitt involved as well. He's probably not going to be working to next season. Try and get these good characters into the squad and build a good atmosphere on the club.
Yeah, I mean, I know for a fact Granger has been working with our academy a couple of nights a week.
Well, his son's I don't know what age group he is, but he's the goalkeeper at one of the age groups.
Yeah, but yeah, ideally, I'd love him here in some form of capacity because, we're not going to have the Simo in out debate this week, but he's not going to be here forever. And I think it's spoken a lot about in recent years that managers don't get as much time at clubs as they used to, and that works the other way. We said before about Neil Harris. Managers get another offer from a club and they're gone. And I feel like Simo isn't going to be here forever. And if we can have someone who gets the club the way that a Danny Granger would, maybe as his replacement one day, 10 games into a League Two season, if we're top of the league, winning 5-0 every week, and it's all wonderful. If our manager is from, say, Manchester or London, when a club down there sacks their manager in League One, where are they going to be looking for the next manager? They're going to be looking at the top of League Two. So if we can have someone who gets the club the way Simo does and sort of offers us a little bit of loyalty to build what we want to build, I think that's the best way forward.
Yeah. I think it's about getting a few of these faces in. I'm not just obviously, as I mentioned, they're not just Granger, but someone like Devitt, and there's other faces down the years. I'm sure would be interested in getting involved with the coaching side and things like that. So I think it's really good to try and make them feel like they're part of the club still, and that they want to come back and be involved. And you get that impression with both Granger and Devitt that they'd love to. So yeah, it's just all the best to Danny for the rest of the season. I'm pretty sure Workington are going to stay up. I'm just looking in the table. They're fairly comfortable, aren't they? And to be fair, they've done pretty well in their first season back up. I think they've drawn a lot of games, haven't they, actually, Adam? You've watched it a bit closer than me, but they've had a lot of high-scoring games as well, which might speak to the style of football. Although the games down at that level can be quite erratic sometimes. You get games where they can be boring as anything. In the second half, there's 7 goals or something like that. That's just the type of football and the varying levels of players you get down there. But yeah, if they could convince him to come back, I don't think he'd come in as an assistant manager as such. No. I think he may be just obviously with his son being in the academy and just his sort of general nature. I think
an academy role maybe would suit him first, and then he can transition to the first team if needs be, or if he wanted to. But like you said, having players like him back involved with the club would be a nice touch.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, looking there, they scored 57 goals, which I think is the best in the bottom half of the division. But they've also conceded 63, which is I think like one of the fourth worst in the bottom half. So it probably tells you exactly what you said there. I think losing Dan Wordsworth was a big blow for them as well earlier in the season. Obviously, he retired from playing, so I think that's been a bit of a challenge to replace him. But there you go. Right, that's pretty much it for this week. I don't think there's anything else to cover. Thanks once again, guys, for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Cheers.
Yeah, no worries.
Well, thanks everyone for listening as usual. I always forget to say this, if you want to get in contact with us, you can find us on Twitter at Brunton Bugle. We're on Facebook as well. We don't update the Facebook page as much as we should do. I probably should get around to doing that a bit more often. We're also on Instagram. Again, I don't update that anywhere near as much as I should. The Twitter page is the best place to grab us generally. Or if you want to drop us an email, we're always keen for correspondence from listeners. bruntonbugle@gmail.com. Get yourselves involved there. We'll be back next week with a review of the Reading game and a look ahead to the trip to Charlton, which I think me and you are both doing, Mike, aren't we? We're going on one of the early trains. Not the earliest, because you wouldn't let me book the really cheap one. You insisted I book later because you wanted to lie in, because you were working till late the night before or something like that, I think you said.
Well, not only that, but you think, oh yeah, we'll save £3 by getting the early train, but then we spend £40 in that extra hour on food and drink in London, so...
Yeah, my logic is out the window on that one, but there you go. So yeah, we'll both be that one anyway. We'll be talking ahead of that game. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So all I've got left to say is thanks to everyone for listening, and up the Blues.
Up the Blues.
Up the Blues.